further things such as movements and stuff, or like religions, to an extent. But then obviously there are times when it's not so great, like mob mentality, or so
Yeah, that's pretty horrible.
yeah, that it has its good and bad.
Mm-hmm. I like that. I was wondering what you thought of question number 6. John wants to go out with Sue, but Sue is playing hard to get. John is all the more intrigued and motivated to get a date with Sue. Explain this scenario in terms of the reactance theory.
Okay, so the reactance theory, just make sure I have a correct understanding of this, is kind of like when you want someone to do something, the opposite happens, kind of, right? Because
Right.
kind of like when you're trying to get a child to do something, they might do the opposite just because you're trying to get them. Is that kind of what it is, or?
I just looked it up because it sounds like that's what it would be, but it's a motive to protect or restore one's sense of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Reactance arises when someone threatens our freedom of action.
Okay. So to me, what I get from that is like, so yeah, people are trying to pressure you into doing something, and that to you feels kind of like they're choking you, like you can't decide, right? So
Mm-hmm.
well, let's see. And so instead of like conforming to what they want you to do,
The
you
opposite.
don't, yeah, kind of thing. Well, let's see, because it says, when you try to restrict a person's freedom, what's produced is anti-conformity or the boomerang effect. Let's see. So it says like reactants may contribute to underage drinking. Survey of 18 24-year-olds. Let's see. I mean, does that sound like kind of what it's saying, do you think, or?
I think so. I just think it's interesting that the example is for John being the one who's reacting, where he's
Oh, wait, is that what it
by
says?
pressuring Sue. He's kind of the one who's taking away her choice.
Right. Yeah, because how I would explain that is like maybe Sue feels like he's pressuring her to date him, and
So
like that's threatening her
the
freedom to
opposite.
choose, and instead of her being like, okay, yeah, I want to date you, where if he could be more like easygoing about it and just let her sit back and decide instead of like really pursuing her, maybe. I don't know. I don't
I don't
know.
know. Sounds like a good answer to me.
Okay. Let's see.
Let's do just one more because, like,
Okay.
the assignment says that you are absolutely not to do someone's full assignment for them. And I'm like, oh, they must have had problems with that.
Okay. Let's see.
Okay. I guess we could talk about group size, unanimity, cohesion, status, public response, and no prior commitment are all factors that influence people's conformity. This one's going to take forever. Ugh. Explain each.
Okay.
So I guess we could just like switch off explaining why each one affects your conformity.
Yeah, that worked.
I could start with group size.
Okay.
The bigger a group is, well, because we already talked about like groups that are between 3 and 6 people being the most effective to influence a person. So, if a group is huge, it's hard to not conform, but it's easier than, say, a group of like 6.
Right.
But the more people there are against you, the more that you want to just conform.
Right.
Anyway, does that that makes sense. We're good.
Yeah. Okay, so the next one is unanimous. I can't say that word.
Unanimity.
There you go. Yeah. Is that just when like everyone is in agreement, right?
Yep.
So, let's see, and it's
Wasn't that the one that was like Ash's study?
yeah, I think so. And let's see, all factors. So that's just like when people like agree with other people, or I don't know. I know that it means it's everyone is unanimous and they're all together on their thinking.
Right. So how would that affect someone's conformity?
So, well, okay, so I'm reading like under that section. It says conformity experiments teach the practical lesson that it is easier to stand up for something. You can find someone else to stand up with you. So they use the example of like, oh my gosh, okay, of Mormons and religious groups.
Right. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, no, that is.
I was like, don't you know? We've upped
right.
it.
No, that's funny. I don't know. I feel like it just makes people conform more when more people are in agreement with something.
I agree.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Seems like a lot of people, I mean, not obviously not everyone, but maybe that makes it easier to sway people if more people are in agreement. Is that it? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, let's see. That's I don't know. And when I was reading about it, it kind of reminded me of like maybe think, because it talks about like the Supreme Court judges and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like maybe like as voters or something, if we see them being unanimous on something, it makes us like more in agreement to conform with whatever. I mean, in that case, it's like law or whatever. But does that make sense? Like the way you think, it might bring more conformity to that idea.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but
I just also think that it's harder to stand up to a unanimous group. Like,
yeah.
If you have different political views than everybody around you.
That's true.
That's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
We just lie.
No, that's true. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then there's cohesion. And I just double checked what I thought that was.
Yeah.
And I was right. But cohesion is when the person expressing the opinion is someone that you feel like cohesive with. So you're more likely to believe someone who is like you than someone who is not like you. So, for example, if another member of the church were to like come up and be like, hey, I like this thing. And normally you would be like, I don't know if I like that thing. You might be more likely to be like, yeah, you're right. I do like that thing. As opposed to if somebody who you didn't know, who had nothing to do with anything that you relate to.
Right.
Like a 6-foot-tall Yeti or something walked up and was like, hey, I like this thing. And you're like,
yeah.
Nah, I don't like that thing.
Right. Okay. No, that's a good.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Let's see. All right, so I have status. And what I gathered from status is pretty much that people with more power, or at least even just perceived more powerful or higher status, people tend to follow their example more than like someone who's not at their level, if that so like it gives the example of jaywalking and how like more people were more prone to jaywalking if they saw someone who was well dressed doing it. Let's see. I don't know. I guess I don't know what else to add to that. Just pretty much people with power, I guess, have a strong influence. I wonder why that is. Why do you think that is? Like, why we would tend to follow someone who seems more successful or more powerful as opposed to like just someone who's average or, you know.
I think it's because we're always making perceptions about people, right? We're always like looking around, so we tend to assume that the people who are dressed nicer than us act like they have more power than us, that they are the leaders. You know, you're not just a leader, you act as a leader.
Yeah. Okay.
I feel like we don't really like being in charge all of the time. We like to hand the reins off.
That makes sense.
That's mine.
Or we might perceive them as they know what they're doing. They know like how to navigate life well because they're at this higher status and
and on top of that, like
there too, but I don't know.
And I think along with that are all of the ads that we see that are like Olympic medalists who are in ads telling us to buy something or to do something. I mean, it genuinely increases sales.
That's true.
And that's just because we see them as better than us because, you know, they competed in the Olympics. Does that mean that they know what kind of socks to buy for me particularly? Probably not, but
no, that's true.
I'm sure she's worn socks.
That's true, and I didn't even think about that's like celebrity status. It's the same, you know, same thing. If they endorse something, it seems like, woo, everyone's like, okay, without even like researching, they're just like, it must be good.
I know.
So, yeah. Okay. That was a good example.
Okay. Public response. I think that one kind of stands for itself, you know? If everyone's out there like hating on what you believe in, it's much harder to stand up for yourself. If people are standing there like telling us how terrible it is to buy Ben & Jerry's ice cream because Ben & Jerry's like tests on animals or something, I might be less inclined to buy Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Just because I don't want the public to come after me.
Right. Yep. Let's see. So,
and the last one is no prior commitment.
No prior commitment. So is that just is that like if someone has a prior commitment, they're more likely to do what they said? Because let's see. So if they have a prior behavior or belief, okay, so if like you were to state, oh, I feel this way or something, then later on if you have some, or if there's something relating to that statement that you made, you're more likely to conform to it. Is that?
So it says that people in the face of group pressure, do you now back down? Like, so if you've already made a commitment to something, do you back down? And the answer is that people almost never do, even if you're wrong. If you've committed to something,
I see.
in front of a bunch of other people, you're not going to back down. So if you've never committed to something, if you kind of waffle, you feel more comfortable backing down later.
Okay.
At least that's what it looks like on page 178.
Okay.
My Kindle book.
No, that makes sense. So, okay. And it just made me think of like maybe a politician making a promise and then later they realize maybe that's not the best promise, but they already said they would do it. So they go ahead and is that kind of.
Yep.
And continue on with that. Okay. Out of all of those things we just went over, what do you think? What do you feel like you have seen the most as far as like in your life be like the major, how do I say this, reason why you've seen people conform, I guess? Have you seen any of those more than others, do you think? Or
I think, honestly, I think that status I've seen the most. And I'm not talking about like celebrity status.
Right.
I mean, of course that's a thing.
Right.
Sure. But I mean, like, in classes and in church, people are not comfortable standing up to the teachers,
Mm-hmm.
even if they're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're, like, definitely wrong.
Right.
We all have a very, very hard time, like, standing up to them and being like, well, but wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what it said.
Mm-hmm.
Awkward.
Yep. Okay.
Rather just conform.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And sometimes that's not a bad thing, I don't think. Because sometimes it does require us to kind of look at things differently.
Mm-hmm.
And to better be like, oh, I can see where that person is coming from. But
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it also can be a bad thing. It can inhibit the learning process.
Right.
I mean, these teachers are here to teach us, yes, of course.
Right.
But also, like, we have the opportunity to help them to better understand as well.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Hope our professor doesn't listen to this and think that I'm so, like, the individual.
No, I think that's really accurate, and that's a good example too. And I can see where you would see that, like, because I was trying to think which one I've seen, but I agree, status is definitely one that occurs often.
Right. Well, because, like, I was in church on the week before Mother's Day.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about the lady caught in adultery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this lady who's well known in the ward and, like, apparently well respected is like, well, and then he forgave her and told her to go her way, which was not what happened at all. And my brother and I, like, looked at each other and we were like, no. But nobody dared say anything.
Okay. Right.
And I was like, this is wrong.
Right. So it's, yeah. It's hard though, like you're saying, sometimes to speak up, especially when, you know, maybe you're trying to be respectful of the teacher, or you're just not, no one else is, so you're just kind of sitting back. It's kind of like, it just makes me think of, like, when someone gets hurt, sometimes there's a bunch of bystanders and no one does anything.
A bystander effect.
Or like, what's become more popular is, like, instead of helping someone, everyone pulls out their phone and starts recording instead of doing something.
Yeah, that's true,
like,
too.
So, interesting.
Yeah.
Alrighty, well.
Okay.
Did you want to talk about anything else? I think we did a good job.
I think so, too. I don't think that there's anything left for us to cover unless you have come up with questions in the last, like, 30 seconds.
No, not really. So
Me neither. Okay, thank you so much for coming. I'm
Yes.
sorry I was late.
Mm-hmm. No, it's okay. That's all good.
Have a great day, and will you be group lead
Yes.
next week?
Yep.
So I emailed Karen again.
Mm-hmm.
She hasn't answered me, like, at all.
Okay.
So I think we should just give up.
Yeah.
Not sure
Maybe
what else
after
to
this,
do.
I can check the class list too and see if she's even in the class. Maybe she's not in the class still. I don't know.
That's where I got her email, because she hasn't responded to the last couple of discussion boards.
Okay.
So I got onto the class list and I found her email and I emailed her, but she hasn't answered. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, well, and it says she's still in our group, so that means she's probably still, in our, okay, that's interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll email her too, just to try and include her, but if not, it's awesome meeting with you, so I think we have good discussion, so.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
Bye.